Welcome to Just Changed a Bit History, where we answer questions nobody asked. I'm Aiden.
And I'm Nico, and right now we will answer the question, what if Abraham Lincoln lost the election of 1864 and not getting shot?
Well, yeah. Let's get some context here for our listeners. So, I'm pretty sure most people would know this one, as it's not as different from, the first episode we did. This is more well known, but still. Alright, so in 1864, nearing the end of the American Civil War, a presidential election occurred between the Republican Abraham Lincoln and the Democrat George McClellan, I think. Lincoln wanted to reunite the Union at all costs, no matter what, while McClellan wanted to end the really costly war for the Union, even if it meant letting the Southern states secede from the Union and form the Confederacy. Lincoln barely won the election, or the majority of the popular votes at only 55%, but he did win 212 of the 223 electoral votes, which those are the ones that actually matter in the election, because nearly every state was split down the middle with only like a 1 to 8% margin, where if like 8% more had voted for McClellan, he probably would have won in each state.
But what would have happened if each state had that tiny bit more, that tiny 10% more population voting for him instead of Lincoln, and making McClellan win?
Well, almost certainly McClellan would have undone the Emancipation Proclamation because he was very against it. But that is pretty much all we can say for certain. But that's not why you're here. Let's get into some theorizing here. First, he would stop all attacks on the Confederate territory. This isn't even a question. And he would attempt a peace negotiation. From here, the Confederacy most likely would not have accepted McClellan's offers to join the Union because they were just so against the Union. But if they did end up doing it, it would look nothing like it is today. Slavery almost certainly would still be going on. The Civil Rights Movement would not have happened, as the movement was based on the 13th through 15th Amendments, which, if McClellan was elected, would not have passed or would have been vetoed. In addition, because our Civil Rights Movement sparked the Civil Rights Movement everywhere else in the world, there would be almost no civil rights movements anywhere.
Okay, what would have happened if the Confederacy didn't opt to rejoin the Union? Especially since you're saying that with McClellan, that they would still have slavery? Since I feel like that's a big part of American history with the economy specifically, since it's technically free labor, so they didn't have to pay as much. How would the Industrial Revolution also go after this?
Well, McClellan might have just let them go and just secede from the Union. But if he does not and tries to go the Lincoln route and fight them, it will not go well at all for the Union. If we judge by how he acted when he was the general-in-chief for Lincoln, he would barely do anything, being so scared to act, and he would just absolutely humiliate the Union. General Lee of the Confederate Army might try to reopen the Gettysburg Campaign or another offensive one from the year prior. Impacting the Industrial Revolution, if the Southern states do end up succeeding, the Industrial Revolution might just go the same, because if I remember correctly, the Industrial Revolution was mainly a northern state thing, not the southern state. But if the southern states do rejoin, it's hard to say.
Okay, fair enough. So you're thinking that slavery wouldn't probably impact it, which is a fair assumption, but let's also gain the whole world perspective. How would that affect other countries with civil rights movements?
Well, like I said with civil rights movements, it's hard to say if any will happen across the globe. Some might, but remember, most of them were kicked off by the American Civil Rights Movement. In addition, the so from now on, let's assume that the Southern states did the more likely route of opting out of not joining in the Union, and the Confederacy is still like an active country. So the U.S. would not have been a superpower, meaning that democracy all around the globe might end. In addition, civil rights movement just wouldn't happen. All in all, it would go very bad for anyone but the Confederates if McClellan won the election.
Okay, so let's jump a few years. Like after technically this version of westward expansion, let's hop over to like World War One because that should still happen because Europe probably most of Europe was already done with slavery at this point. So how would World War One go with a separated U.S.? Which side would each of them choose, and would either of them fight each other?
Well, if the U.S. not being a superpower because they are just missing half their population, probably not half, but a good portion of it. So after winning the Civil War and the Industrial Revolution and the U.S. getting kind of powerful, they got like a thirst for imperialism. And against the Washington Farewell Address, which said to be isolated, they would have they went and fought the Spanish-American War and like the real world. This opened up the gates for the U.S. to become a superpower. With the loss of the Civil War, it is hard to say that they would have gone to the Spanish-American War, and if they did, it's also hard to say whether they would have won. Because of this, that makes the U.S. not a superpower. And because of that, them joining in to the First World War would be really unlikely. In addition, the U.S. in our current timeline, even though they only joined about a year or two before the war ended, they still provided a bunch of resources like oil and weapons and such. At least they did in World War II, I know that, to the Allies. So if they didn't do that, then the Allies would have had a harder time fighting the Germans, and it would be hard to say who would win there.
Okay, fair enough. So, more than likely, if this whole hypothetical scenario happens, Germans would have won World War One. So, does that mean would the Confederacy even play a part in this, or would they just be also neutral?
Well, the Confederacy was alive for only 5 years in the real world. In addition, most of that was under constant pressure by the Union. So it's hard to know their political motives. I doubt they would follow the Washington Farewell Address of isolationists. But also keep in mind that Great Britain and France were constantly buying cotton from the Confederacy, meaning they actually, now that I think about it, they might have intervened on behalf of the Allies during World War One. Which I know, like, we stereotype the Allies and the Central Powers as like good guy, bad guy.
Ooh.
But having the Confederacy, which are objectively the bad guys, join the Allies, which are normally cast as the good guys, seems like weird and unlikely.
It's like polar opposites. You're not supposed to have those two together. That's why the winners always write the history books. Whoever wins shows up that they're the true good ones. But even with that, so that probably means the no Germans never come to power, nor does like the USSR, because the USSR gained a lot of power from World War II.
True, but now that we talked about the Confederacy probably joining in on World War One on the behalf of the Allies taking place with the Union, then there's a chance that also I should say this assumes that the Union didn't try and invade the Confederacy, which they probably would have.
And probably a few times, but
Yeah.
we don't need to worry about that part.
Yeah, assuming that doesn't happen. If the Confederacy did join in, and if they did if they did join in, I'm trying to struggle to come up with what the Confederacy could offer the Allies, because the Union, or the U.S. during World War One, was really industrialized and was able to give like guns and ammo to them. The Confederacy, would they have industrialized using slave labor?
To be honest, that would be a hard one to even just suggest, just because they were around agriculture. I say if they found oil a little sooner and Texas found it, I say they have a good chance. Like specifically, Texas would industrialize fast and use slave labor to pick up that oil as fast as they can for the money. So maybe they could be selling Britain and France the oil and giving them money so they could buy guns, like say Industrial Union, even though we are not part of it, or other places in the world.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So it might be that the same outcome for World War One happens with the Confederacy taking place with the U.S. Although saying the Confederacy would become a superpower might be a stretch.
I do agree with that it probably would be a stretch. I have a feeling it's going to kind of be like America would kind of be like Europe as it is now, where everyone's fighting each other for power and no one's truly a superpower in the real world, to where I feel like that could probably be America, with Canada being its own thing. Alaska is still part of Russia. Greenland is being Greenland. Mexico is probably trying to fight them again. So I can definitely see where they don't come to a superpower. Could you think ever, like, say we do it from World War One to all the way to now, do you think they could ever actually become Union, or would slavery even be disappeared?
Yeah. Well, one thing is going to be certain. Slavery probably would not have disappeared ever.
Okay.
The Union, actually, they might have still tried to pass like an equivalent of the 13th, 14th, and 15th. Maybe not all of them, but with all the slave states succeeding, they would probably...
Except for like Kentucky and a few randoms.
Yeah, I think Kentucky and Maryland didn't.
Yeah, those two were like the only ones. And then Western Virginia just joined us.
Yeah. So...
Sorry, Virginia.
Yeah. It's hard to say what the Union would do. They might become a superpower along with the Confederacy.
Okay.
But something that is really certain is that we would have more Confederacy and more Union clashes.
So, we're going to be fighting each other a whole bunch, like most countries in history. We fight each other because we hated each other for one reason or another. So they would probably become superpowers, but it would take years. To be honest, I feel like Confederacy might be more powerful because they got the slave labor, which is free labor.
Yeah.
And they can work them as hard as they want because they don't care about who they are. They don't care that they are still human.
Mm-hmm.
So could they actually become a better economic powerhouse than China?
Yeah.
So think everything goes to China.
Although something that did occur to me was that during the Civil War, the Confederacy tried to get help from Britain and France, and they were blocked from like the Kingdom of Russia, and also because of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's entirely true, but I'm pretty sure Great Britain did outlaw slavery already.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that. I think they did.
So they might have tried to cut ties with the Confederacy.
So that means they probably wouldn't even have joined the Allies. That means they might actually struggle much more, becoming kind of like a third world country, like Mexico, even though they have a lot of modern stuff, they might still be kind of like a third world country like Mexico.
Yeah. Also, I think Mexico's a second world.
Oh yeah, good point.
Second world, yeah.
Sorry, sorry, people that are listening from Mexico.
Yeah. I was gonna say. But,
sorry, guys.
Yeah.
You guys got a lot of crime. Let's just say that.
The Mexican-American War. No, that was before the Civil War.
Yeah, so that means... What about California? What would be going on with California? Like California, New Mexico, Arizona. Those guys didn't leave. They just were just there. Or like, what about Oklahoma? Would Texas try to say, yo, we deserve Oklahoma after you bullied us?
Yeah, it's hard to say. The Confederacy might try claiming other territories, or at least, but immediately after, you have to remember that, so, assuming McClellan just let them go, they were still in a tight situation. They might not try to push their luck with it, but if they did humiliate the Union, they almost definitely would have tried to, grab extra territory. They probably would have tried grabbing West Virginia. They might have convinced Maryland to, come over. If I remember correctly, a mini revolution happened in Maryland trying to get them to join the Confederacy. So maybe that might spark up again, getting even more states to succeed.
Okay, so... But you're thinking them taking territory from like a treaty is very unlikely.
Well, like I said, that depends on whether McClellan chose to fight them and humiliate the Union, or if he just let them go.
Okay. So California's safe for now.
Yeah, although this would increase the precedent of more states' rights than in previous years, because remember the huge argument over states' rights on whether they had the right to succeed and whether they, like the nullification crisis too, this would increase the states' rights in the Union. So other states might try the same thing.
Okay. And this is kind of like a out-of-pocket question. Where would you think the capital would be in the Confederacy? Would it be somewhere in Texas? Because that's going to become a powerhouse, guarantee. Or would it still be in Virginia to where they can say hi to D.C.? Just wave to them. Hi, guys!
Well, I would need to do some research on why they chose Richmond, Virginia. They might try to move it to South Carolina because they were the first ones to succeed, so it would be like... No, it was South Carolina, or was it North Carolina? One of the Carolinas was the first to succeed, and then the other states followed.
Okay, so, sorry Texas, again, you're not having your starlight this time.
Although, maybe, if I remember correctly, the hurricane, some hurricane, wrecked Galveston, and they were on their way to become what was known as the New York of the South.
Good point. I remember the Galveston hurricane. It was an atrocity, but yeah, that's a good point. Like, since Galveston was going to be the New York, so could that technically become the capital before they even knew, here comes the hurricane?
True. Yeah, if the hurricane didn't happen, then Galveston would become a powerhouse. Although,
that's Mother Nature. we can't change Mother Nature, guys.
Yeah, I think we should start wrapping it up. This has been
got off track in some areas, but it really brought a new idea of what could happen if the Confederacy did lose.
Yeah.
Till next time.
Lose.
Didn't. They did lose in this time in our world.
Yeah.